I've been seeing in a lot of different places people talking about the concept of gameplay versus story. And this is something that I've seen many times. People saying that gameplay is the most important aspect of any game, and so you may not even need a story. Story might not even matter. What they really care about is the mechanics of the game, or that sort of thing. And this is something that I really, really disagree with. I think just the idea that you need to sacrifice story a bit in order to have good gameplay, that just doesn't make any sense. For many different reasons. There are so many games out there that the story and the gameplay mix together so well that they're like pretty much indistinguishable. You go into a game and you're experiencing the story and the gameplay at the same time. There are different games where the story is treated more as a reward, and that's something I've seen people talk about as well, where the story kind of comes after, you beat a boss or you beat some sort of scene, you get like a cutscene. And honestly, I think that the cutscene itself is a bit of an outdated thing. I'm not saying that cutscenes are bad necessarily, or that we shouldn't have them at all, but there are so many different ways to integrate those scenes into the gameplay now that I don't think they're as necessary. So I wanted to talk about, why does story matter in gaming? Because it's something that I care about a lot. Obviously, a lot of my content, I want it to be more story-based. And the reason story matters is that it brings meaning to the gameplay. So, for example, you have gameplay, you'd go through the game, you'd play it, it'd be fun for a while, I think. But eventually, it would get old. You'd get over the gameplay. The story is what keeps you going. It gives you more of a connection to what you're doing. It really takes a game to the next level. So, a good example of this would be Metal Gear Solid, just the series as a whole. So, you take something like, let's say you're really leaning towards gameplay, and you really want to focus on gameplay. You get a game like Metal Gear Solid 5. Metal Gear Solid 5 was really good, but I think it really lacked in a lot of ways. A lot of what Metal Gear has always been known for is the story, and even if that story is kind of, out there and crazy, you still missed a lot of that in Metal Gear Solid 5, in my opinion. When you start out the game, you are kind of thrown into this crazy story where you're calling through like the hospital, and you have this guy, he's fire everywhere. And that part of the game I thought was the best part of the entire game. For me, like, having that experience was just so much more meaningful than the rest of the game, which was really hardcore gameplay focused. A lot of the rest of the game was just going to different places, picking up blueprints, building up your base, rescuing people, and all of that is fun, and the gameplay in that game is fantastic. It's some of the best gameplay in any game that I've ever played, but it didn't mean that much to me when I was going through it. I just really felt like it didn't matter what I was doing to an extent. And see, Metal Gear Solid 5 still had some story, so as you were going through it, you felt like there still was some meaning to it, but overall, it was just a lot less meaningful than that first 1 to 2 hours where you really felt like you were engaged. And that's what good story does. It engages you into the game. It immerses you into the game. If you don't want to be immersed as much, if you just want to focus on gameplay for an entire game, that's okay. That's still fine, and there are people that will enjoy that game. But for me, it just doesn't mean enough for me to get engaged and to keep going with the game. I'll put down a game in a couple hours if the story doesn't get me into it. So I really think that's what keeps you interested a lot of the time, is the story, is the characters, is the development. It's the plot line keeps you moving forward and keeps you engaged, like I said. A lot of that is down to things like character development. If I was playing a game where there were characters but they were only, say, they were flat. And what a flat character is basically they're very shallow. They have very little depth. You only see kind of a surface level of that character. And there are lots of games like this that have characters that are kind of flat. What having a more rounded character, a character with more depth, does is make you feel more connected to that character. You feel like you can relate to them. That keeps you moving, that keeps you engaged. And that's something that story can do that gameplay can't. Gameplay can keep you engaged in a different way, but at least for people like me, the story engages you more than gameplay ever could. It's about wanting to discover things about yourself. That's one thing that story does. You see a character, you see a situation, you see a plot line, and you think, how would I react to this situation? How would I go through this? If I was this character, what would I be like? Would I make the same decisions as that character? Would I do the things they do, or would I do something different? And that's where the integration of gameplay and story really comes in, is allowing you to make that decision. And a lot of the games that do it the best, that's what you feel like. You feel like you get to make those decisions, and that combination of the two coming together just elevates the game to such a higher level than I think you can get with something that doesn't have it. Like, say, Rocket League. Something like Rocket League. I've seen a lot of people talk about how Rocket League is one of the best games of last year, saying that all of what it does great is all gameplay based. And maybe for some people that's fine. Maybe for some people that's all they need. They need something that keeps them going through mechanics and that sort of thing. But for me, I don't think a game can be great, like absolute top 10 out of 10, without having some sort of story to go with it. Because I think gameplay will only take you to like an 8 on the scale. Gameplay, though important, doesn't connect you as much to a game. That's just my take on the story versus gameplay. If I think about games that wouldn't be as good if they didn't have a story, that list could just go on forever. There are so many games that you break them down to only their mechanics and they just lose all meaning, all connection, all engagement. A game like The Last of Us has a lot of interesting mechanics going for it, but you take away the emotional depth that you have in that game when you're dealing with the girl and dealing with all the situations that come up, dealing with the idea that you're having to kill these people that are just trying to survive like you are, and it just doesn't mean as much without that. So I think that the best games are the ones that have a focus on both story and gameplay.